The Dominion warship loomed above Earth's atmosphere, a monstrous shadow against the stars. Inside its cavernous hold, dozens of genetically engineered war beasts growled and thrashed within their containment fields. Massive claws scraped against reinforced metal, tails lashed with enough force to dent titanium, and eyes burned with instinctive violence. Dominion commanders observed from elevated platforms, smug with confidence. These creatures had conquered dozens of worlds, leaving nothing but silence in their wake. Earth, labeled a resource-rich but fragile world, was expected to fall within days. A sleek Dominion officer pressed a command glyph. Alarms blared, containment fields dropped, and gravity shields flung the beasts toward Earth's surface like meteorites of destruction. They hit with thunderous force. Craters opened across farmlands, cities shuddered under shock waves, and forests splintered beneath their impact. From the craters, enormous forms emerged. Beasts of various designs, armored quadrupeds with flaming maws, serpentine leviathans gliding on magnetized pulses, multi-limbed behemoths that dripped venom capable of corroding steel. All roared their challenge to the tiny blue planet, but Earth didn't respond with screams. Not in the way the Dominion expected. In London, military satellites had tracked the descending creatures before impact. By the time they landed, squads were already mobilized, not to fire blindly, but to observe, catalog, and assess. Drone swarms hovered just beyond reach, their cameras capturing every twitch, every feint. The war beasts rampaged through abandoned streets, smashing vehicles, toppling statues, and testing the strength of human structures. But they were met with silence, eerie and calculated. Where were the humans? The question almost seemed to frustrate the creatures as they roared into empty streets. Far below street level, in command bunkers and data centers, human tacticians and behaviorists studied every movement. Dr. Emily Zhao, a behavioral xenobiologist, tapped furiously on her tablet. They hesitate before entering narrow alleys. Possibly claustrophobic or possess aversion to confined spaces, she noted aloud. Captain Ramirez nodded beside her. Excellent. Prepare sonic lures. We'll herd them into engineered traps. No panic. No chaos. Just cold, strategic adaptation. In New York, one of the largest beasts, a towering brute with crystalline spikes, roared at Times Square, slashing at billboards. Suddenly, dozens of LED screens flickered and synchronized, displaying swirling patterns and pulsating lights. The creature froze, entranced by the shifting visuals, giving drone units time to deploy distraction devices. It chased glowing orbs down Broadway, its deadly claws now swiping harmless holograms while missile units took careful aim. But even the missile teams were given a strange order: do not kill. Disable, corral, redirect. They followed orders. In rural Iowa, a serpent-like monstrosity slithered between golden fields, ripping up soil and snapping at combines. Farmers, instead of fleeing, rolled out large steel spheres, experimental decoys, and recorded its reactions. To their astonishment, the beast coiled around one of the orbs and began nudging it playfully. Laughter erupted in the command center monitoring the feed. "You've got to be kidding me," one technician whispered. The order went out. Deploy more spheres, study the results. The Dominion command ship monitored the footage streaming in. Confusion spread among their ranks. "Why aren't they screaming?" hissed one officer. Another glared at the data feed. "Why aren't they fighting back like others?" Panic crept in. The humans were not reacting with chaos or terror. They were analyzing. Every rampage became a controlled experiment. Every attack turned into a learning opportunity. In Tokyo, when a colossal, gorilla-like beast began tearing through Shibuya Crossing, drone teams deployed luminescent trails along rooftops. The beast followed them with growing curiosity. Within minutes, it found itself inside a massive containment ring constructed from shipping containers and electromagnetic barriers. Scientists in hazmat suits emerged to observe. They even offered food samples from behind shielding. The creature accepted, snorting in confusion but surprisingly calm. Night fell, and around the world, similar scenes played out. Human resilience wasn't just about resistance, it was adaptability. On a world where earthquakes, hurricanes, and volcanoes were regular events, humanity had learned not to panic but to think. Every war beast became not an invader but a puzzle to be solved. Across command centers, tacticians shared real-time data, swapping observations and tactics. Global cooperation surged like never before. By morning, the Dominion commanders were panicking. Their unstoppable weapons had encountered something far more terrifying than fear: curiosity and cleverness. Beasts that had laid waste to entire civilizations now found themselves corralled, studied, and in some cases, distracted by large metallic balls and colorful lights. Dominion generals demanded explanations, but their scientists could offer none. The war beasts weren't just losing control, they were adapting too, responding to the humans' unexpected reactions with confusion and eventual calm. The first day of invasion ended not with fire and ruin, but with spreadsheets, behavioral models, and observation reports. The war beasts, bred for destruction, had met a species not defined by strength or terror, but by relentless adaptability. And as Earth's strategists regrouped and planned their next steps, one message was already clear: the Dominion had just made a colossal mistake. On the second day of the invasion, the Dominion war beasts began to behave differently. No longer were they relentlessly rampaging. Now, some wandered cautiously, glancing around as if trying to anticipate traps. Others sat, confused, scratching at strange earth smells and sounds they couldn't quite comprehend. Dominion Command, watching from orbit, was growing desperate. They had unleashed apex predators designed for annihilation. Instead, Earth was treating them like lost zoo animals. The Dominion's attempt at psychological domination had backfired. Now, the humans were not just adapting, they were turning the tables. In a vast underground command center beneath Geneva, global leaders and scientists gathered. The room buzzed with excitement rather than fear. Huge screens displayed live feeds from cities worldwide, showing the creatures contained, studied, and in some cases pacified. Dr. Emily Zhao stood at the center of it all. "They're intelligent," she began. "Not sentient in our sense, but highly adaptive. But more importantly, they're confused by unpredictability. Every other civilization the Dominion unleashed them on reacted with terror or aggression. We're giving them curiosity, problem-solving, and in some cases play." She pointed to footage of the massive serpent in Iowa, now lazily coiled around another metal orb content. Laughter broke out around the room. In Paris, a crystalline quadruped that had torn through streets the previous day was now cornered in a makeshift enclosure between historic buildings. Instead of launching attacks, French animal behaviorists had introduced scent markers and soothing sonic frequencies. Slowly, the creature's hostile posturing lessened. One brave handler, in a reinforced suit, gently extended a long mechanical arm offering what seemed like a large, glowing mineral. The creature sniffed, then carefully took it, crunching down on the treat with satisfaction. The council chamber back in Geneva erupted in applause. On another feed from Sydney, aerial drones broadcast live images of a dragon-like war beast diving gracefully after holographic birds projected through the sky, an elaborate aerial game that kept it away from populated areas. Dominion commanders were furious. On the bridge of their ship, the admiral slammed his fist against the command console. They are to fear these beasts, not entertain them. The data showed otherwise. Behavioral spikes indicated confusion and diminishing aggression among their own monsters. The command issued new orders, force reaggression protocols. The beasts' control collars were activated, flooding their systems with stimuli meant to provoke fury. But even this had diminishing returns. The creatures lashed out, but with less focus. Some even resisted the stimulus, focusing instead on more familiar patterns of behavior they had established during their interactions with the humans. Meanwhile, in New York, a plan was unfolding. Captain Ramirez and his team orchestrated the capture of the towering crystalline beast that had menaced Times Square. Using enormous screens to project calm visuals and resonant frequencies, they guided the creature into a massive floating containment rig. Slowly, gently, it entered without resistance. Inside the rig, it was given soft lighting, a mineral-rich environment, and what humans would recognize as enrichment stimuli. Within hours, the creature lay calmly, humming with deep reverberations that scientists recorded and began translating into frequencies of trust. The Dominion's panic deepened. What was intended as psychological warfare had become a diplomatic and scientific opportunity for Earth. In Tokyo, Young students gathered around secure observation screens to watch the now docile beast in Shibuya perform what appeared to be playful gestures. It batted at giant balloons and chased light patterns across the ground. Social media platforms worldwide exploded with fascination. The hashtag #WarBeastPlaydate began trending. Art, memes, and commentary flourished. Children around the world sent video messages to scientists, offering ideas for creature games, toys, and even nicknames. The once feared invasion was turning into the most unexpected cultural phenomenon. In Geneva, the strategy pivoted. Dr. Zhao addressed the global assembly. They're not invaders anymore. They're confused, powerful animals trying to make sense of an unfamiliar environment. We can redirect this aggression into companionship, or at least containment through mutual curiosity. The Dominion never accounted for empathy as a weapon. She smiled. Let's show them just how dangerous human kindness can be. On the Dominion command bridge, dread turned to horror. Reports flowed in, not of destruction, but of creatures refusing commands, responding instead to human cues. War beasts that once tore down cities were now lounging in containment zones, being studied and, in some cases, petted with mechanical arms. Earth's adaptability and compassion had turned weapons of terror into subjects of scientific wonder. What began as an invasion was rapidly becoming the galaxy's most humiliating defeat, not through force of arms, but through playfulness, curiosity, and understanding. The turning point came when the Dominion's war beasts began outright resisting their handlers. Across the occupied zones, Dominion forces attempted to reassert control, but the creatures were no longer following commands with the same brutal efficiency. Instead of rampaging through human cities, many of them hesitated, responding not to their neural implants but to environmental factors introduced by human scientists and behaviorists. Some of the most dangerous war beasts, creatures engineered for slaughter, had begun displaying unexpected behaviors, hesitation, curiosity, and even what could only be described as attachment. In London, a Dominion enforcer watched in disbelief as his assigned war beast, a towering, six-legged predator with a chitinous exoskeleton, refused to attack. Instead, it was fixated on a group of humans across the street who were cautiously rolling a large, luminous sphere back and forth between them. The creature tilted its massive head, observing. Then, to the shock of everyone present, it reached forward with a clawed limb and nudged the sphere, sending it rolling back. The humans laughed, and the creature rumbled in what sounded eerily like contentment. The enforcer activated the neural override, demanding aggression. The creature twitched, shook its head, and instead of charging, it sat down, watching the humans expectantly. A wave of disbelief spread among the Dominion ranks. The same phenomenon was happening across the planet. In Brazil, a massive reptilian war beast, once responsible for decimating an entire military outpost, was found basking in the sun on a Rio de Janeiro rooftop, ignoring its Dominion handlers. Local zoologists had studied its physiology and realized it responded positively to heat therapy. Makeshift thermal lamps were deployed, and within hours, the beast's aggression had dropped to almost zero. It was now responding more to human stimuli than to Dominion control. In Geneva, world leaders and scientists were piecing together the puzzle. They're no longer just weapons, Dr. Emily Zhao explained to the gathered officials. They're adapting. The Dominion bred them for war, but they never accounted for long-term behavioral shifts. These creatures have never encountered species that respond to violence with curiosity and care rather than just fear or counter-aggression. We've altered the dynamic, and they're beginning to imprint on us rather than on their creators. A murmur spread through the room. Military officials were still wary, but the evidence was undeniable. In Tokyo, an event unfolded that sent shockwaves through both human and Dominion forces. A battle was raging in the streets between human resistance fighters and Dominion enforcers when one of the largest war beasts, an armored quadruped the size of a transport ship, stormed into the battlefield. At first, the human forces prepared for the worst. But instead of attacking, the creature turned on its own handlers. With a deafening roar, it swatted a Dominion enforcer into a building, then positioned itself protectively in front of a group of civilians. Silence fell over the battlefield. The war beast let out a low, rumbling growl but did not advance. The message was clear. It was no longer fighting for the Dominion. The Dominion command, observing from orbit, was in complete disarray. "They're losing control," Admiral Viacore snarled, staring at the screens in disbelief. Reports were coming in from every region. The creatures were rejecting their programming. Some were even responding to human voices, body language, and environmental conditioning. What was supposed to be the perfect invasion force was falling apart, not through human military might, but through something the Dominion had never encountered before: human adaptability and emotional intelligence. Social media across Earth erupted. Footage of war beasts playing, lounging in the sun, and even defending humans spread like wildfire. People began naming them, treating them like exotic, oversized pets. #AdoptAWarBeast trended worldwide, with images of scientists and civilians carefully interacting with the creatures. The creatures' once feared status was shifting into something else entirely, a bizarre, awe-inspiring coexistence. Meanwhile, in New York, Captain Ramirez and his team had a bold idea. They had successfully pacified a towering winged predator by feeding it a specific nutrient blend that mimicked the diet of its ancestral species. Now, they were taking it one step further. Using a mix of pheromones and behavioral reinforcement, they attempted something unthinkable: riding it. Ramirez stood on a platform as the creature, now dubbed Stormbreaker by the local media, extended its massive wings. With careful, deliberate movements, he climbed onto its back. The entire world watched through live streams as, for the first time in history, a human and a Dominion war beast took to the skies together. The implications were staggering. Back in the Dominion war room, panic turned to desperation. "We must withdraw," one of the generals insisted. "The war beasts are compromised." Viacore slammed his fist onto the table. "We cannot lose to a species that plays with our weapons like pets." But the reality was undeniable. The invasion had failed. The beasts were no longer theirs to command, and the humans had turned terror into triumph. As Earth's skies filled with reclaimed war beasts, now under human guidance, a realization settled over the Dominion forces. They had not just lost the battle. They had committed the greatest blunder in galactic warfare. They had unleashed their most fearsome weapons upon a species that didn't just survive the impossible, it befriended it. The Dominion's retreat was nothing short of chaos. Their dreadnoughts lifted from Earth's atmosphere in ragged formations, their commanders barking panicked orders across broken communication channels. What had begun as an assured conquest ended in disarray, not due to overwhelming military force, but because the Dominion's greatest weapons had turned against them. On Earth's surface, the transformation was complete. War beasts, once instruments of terror, now roamed freely under human guidance. They lounged in city parks, rested on rooftops, and stood sentinel outside hospitals and shelters, responding with gentle rumbling sounds to the voices of children and the soft touch of human hands. In the United Nations Assembly Hall, the atmosphere was electric. For the first time since the invasion began, representatives from every nation gathered in person, joined by scientists, animal behaviorists, and military leaders. The massive screens behind the dais showed live footage: a colossal war beast in Central Park playing tug-of-war with a group of laughing children, another carefully letting a rescue worker wrap bandages around its scaled limb in Paris, and one more delicately holding a frightened puppy in its jaws, delivering it unharmed to safety. The entire world watched in awe as what was once destruction became guardianship. Ambassador Leila Chen addressed the assembly, her voice steady but full of wonder. "We have witnessed something none of us could have imagined. These creatures, engineered to destroy, have chosen not to. Instead, they have responded to compassion, curiosity, and understanding. What was meant to be our end has become our alliance." Applause erupted across the room, but Chen raised her hand for silence. "The question before us now is this: what do we do with them?" Outside the hall, streets were crowded not with fear but with celebration. War beasts moved through the crowds with cautious grace, their immense frames carefully navigating human spaces. Street artists painted murals depicting the beasts alongside humans. Children carried plush toy versions of the once feared creatures. Musicians composed songs celebrating their loyalty. But the shift wasn't purely symbolic. The military was already working with scientists to integrate these creatures into Earth's defense systems. At a secret facility in Nevada, Colonel Ramirez stood before his team, and one of the largest war beasts on record, a serpent-dragon hybrid with iridescent scales and wings that shimmered in the sunlight. "We have a chance to do something unprecedented," he told his team. "These creatures respond to empathy, to trust. They've shown they can protect us. Now we must learn how to protect them, too." Across the world, humanitarian groups rallied around the idea of mutual care. In Tokyo, schools organized Beast Education Days, where students learned about the biology and emotional needs of the creatures. In Kenya, conservationists were studying them alongside native wildlife, noting behaviors that hinted at complex social structures. In the Amazon, a war beast was observed protecting endangered jaguars, herding them away from poachers. The Dominion fleet, now safely back in orbit, watched helplessly as the transmission feeds displayed a world they no longer recognized, a world where their war beasts nuzzled human caretakers, where laughter replaced terror. The council chambers aboard the Dominion flagship were silent as Admiral Viecourt stood alone, watching Earth's broadcasts. His pride burned, but deeper still was confusion. How had this gone so wrong? Or perhaps, how had humans done so right? Earth's response to the Dominion's most fearsome weapons had not been to escalate violence, but to adapt and respond with intelligence and compassion. The result was the ultimate irony, an army of war beasts that no longer belonged to the Dominion but to Earth itself. Viecourt deactivated the screen. "We underestimated them," he whispered. Back on Earth, the final moment of transformation came during the Global Unity Parade. The streets of New York were lined with people of all ages and backgrounds. At the front of the procession walked world leaders, followed by war beasts draped in garlands and painted with ceremonial designs. In the center of Times Square, a monument was unveiled, a towering sculpture of a human hand reaching out, gently touching the head of a massive beast with the inscription, "From fear, friendship. From power, peace." As fireworks lit the night sky and the war beasts lifted their heads to watch, the mood was not one of victory through conquest, but of unity through understanding. Scientists, soldiers, civilians, all had played their part. The creatures had changed, but so had humanity. No longer merely survivors of an invasion, they were now ambassadors of a new form of coexistence. And somewhere in the heart of that celebration, a young girl reached out to scratch the head of a war beast the size of a bus. It purred, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through the pavement, through the crowd, and into the hearts of everyone listening. A species that could befriend the unfriendable had done so. Earth had turned the greatest galactic blunder into the greatest galactic lesson. Never underestimate the power of empathy.